The 2nd of September 2022, video 47M for Mike, NASA and the Moon. President Kennedy was a politician. He promised to go to the moon. You know what politicians, presidents, or promises are like. I have to kind of talk a bit loud because it's hard sometimes to hear all my words. It's very, very difficult. So I have to speak a bit louder and keep up to the camera, which makes it that wee bit difficult. By right, I should have a little microphone, but I haven't at the moment. Now, all records in relation to the Apollo program were destroyed. There were 7 missions, 6 got to the moon, according to NASA. Nobody has gone back for 50 years. And Nixon was the breed of the border reivers who came from England and Scotland. That was the breed of them. And they were some of them were very chancy, and he was certainly chancy. You would call him Tricky Dicky. So I wouldn't trust them. But among the things they did, NASA did, and one of them was the Voyager programs, and the Voyager programs were excellent. Oh, they're great. They're still going on. There's Voyager 1 and Voyager 2. And Voyager 2 took a photograph of the Earth from the furthest point it was ever taken, and that's available. It's a lovely photograph. It just makes you feel how small we actually are. So the Voyager was a great program. I admire it. The International Space Station, likewise. And the Mars rovers. NASA definitely sent rovers to Mars, no doubt about it. And you can actually see them on the surface of Mars. They did a lot more with Mars than they did with the moon for some reason. And they seem to be a lot more interested in Mars. And the whole idea now is to get to Mars. You think we'd conquer the moon first. But anyway, one of the points about that makes me doubt, and some of the things that I doubt, and I definitely sometimes look on some of these things different to others. But a hypergolic rocket is what was used. With a hypergolic rocket, when you bring the two substances together, I think one of them is hydrazine, the other is liquid oxygen. When you bring them together, the moment they hit, they explode. They fire straight away. They need no spark. Now, if you have a paraffin oil rocket or any other flammable gas or otherwise, it needs a spark. They do not. If you have oxygen and color gas or propane gas or acetylene, it will not light without an ignition, whereas the hypergolic rocket will. The two burns the minute they hit. There's an excellent film there for Nottingham University. But the big point about it is one of the substances used was hydrazine 50. Hydrazine 50. Sorry, Aerozine 50. Hydrazine is one of the fuels, but when you have the two together, it's 50-50 of this substance with oxygen. It's a mixture of the two propellants with oxygen at 50-50 proportion. Okay, doesn't really matter. It was the main rocket fuel between 1959 and 2005, and it was used in all the Titan 1, Titan 2s and Titan 3 rockets. And you can go on there and see those rockets being launched, and you'll see that there's a huge plume of smoke and a huge flame out of them. Now, the problem is that in the case of the Apollo 15 and 17, the liftoff is shown. They had a camera on the rovers that filmed the liftoff, and there's no smoke or flame from them whatsoever. Now, just understand that when you lift off those type of ascent modules, you have bolts, 4 bolts holding the module down to the lander underneath, and those bolts have to be sturdy, and they're removed by explosive for taking off, for liftoff. And what happens is there's a long nut with a thread in it, and the bolt is screwed down. But the explosive charge is below the nut. Like that's the thread. The bolt like that. The explosive is in here, and when it fires, it bursts the nut completely out. And there are 4 of them. So in the liftoff scene, they have that right. You'll see a huge bang. That is not the rocket starting. That is the breaking of these bolts. In some of them, you'll see actually like things coming towards you and a huge flash. That's right. The very minute the bolts are broken, and the explosives are done in such a way that they have to bust. You just couldn't have one hanging on. If you had, you couldn't lift off. You couldn't get out. So you were finished. They were all dead. So that happened, and the next thing then is the hypergolic rocket. The minute these are broken, the two substances are brought together to cause the the rocket to lift and lift up. But there should be smoke and there should be flame. Now, what the people that try to shoot me down say is that, well, that was in a vacuum. Well, there was a film taken from the International Space Station of a rocket taking off from the Earth, and it came up into space, and it shows it entering space, and there's a flame out of it all the way right up into space, and all the evidence is that while the fumes and the product of rockets in space get away faster, they don't have the air to stop them. There is still a flame, there is still a trail of smoke, except it escapes a bit more. Now, don't forget, this liftoff ascent vehicle was on the moon, so straight away the blast of the rocket had something to stop it. So we should be able to see a huge amount of smoke and a huge amount of flame before the rocket lifts. And as it lifts, there is absolutely nothing, and we actually get a view of it going up like that. So there's absolutely no smoke out of it, and that makes me suspect it was lifted up on a winch. Now, another thing then is the rover batteries. They were potassium hydroxide. They're used to this day. They're called alkaline batteries. And yet these batteries can't have been any more than maybe 18 inches by 2 foot underneath the rover, and maybe 6 inches. They can't have been very big. And yet they powered a manned craft, admittedly at 1/6 gravity, but with dust and everything, for up to 3.5, 4 hours. Even if it was only 20 minutes, in my opinion, that's the best you get. And they performed the same at the end of their trek around the moon, often went a long distance away, as they do at the very beginning, and I find that deeply suspicious. Now, the potassium hydroxide is caustic potash, and it's the same as almost a sodium caustic soda, and it's an alkali, so they call them alkali batteries. Now, they replaced nickel cadmium. That's only in the last 10 years that they realised cadmium was a poison. It's a dangerous chemical. It's banned for most things now. Now, the thing about it is, why didn't they use cadmium? I don't know, but it's very strange how they got the mileage out of this battery. A solid battery that couldn't be charged. I find that very, very strange. So that's that little thing. Now, the next thing then is the spacesuits should have picked up a lot of dust when they went back into the lunar vehicle on the moon and settled down and took a relax. There should have been a lot of dust. There should have been a huge dust problem. Sticky, sharp dust. There's no doubt that's there. And yet there was no mention of it at all. Now, the other thing is that when the astronauts came home, they were interviewed, and Patrick Moore asked them questions about the night sky. And they knew nothing about the night sky, and they seemed to be very relaxed. If I came back on a mission like that, I'd be hyper. I mean, we're after coming back, I'm alive. And you'd be telling people, but they seem to be very subdued. Now, the allegation about the stars is that if it was a fake scene and they had a big black sheet behind the astronauts and they wanted to put the stars in, they could never get them exactly placed, because any amateur photographer could just get a film, a negative of Apollo and a negative of the one taken outside himself, and flip them back and forward, and you'd see if there were stars moving and prove the whole thing was a fake. So that was the big idea, why there was no stars in the sky, and I can see no stars, and I believe that a camera would pick it up. To try to say a camera wouldn't pick them up, tell you go out most nights and take a photograph of the brighter stars, and I think it will, but I won't argue on that. Certainly the ordinary smartphone will do it, because we've already done it in a clip. Now, then the thing is, there's a film of the landing, of the Apollo 11 landing, and it shows it going along. Now, don't forget, in Area 51 they had a model of the moon and a railway line round it, so they could film for the film Stanley Kubrick's Apollo, what was that, Space Odyssey 2001, I think it was Stanley Kubrick's film anyway. I never bothered looking at it, but they had the way of faking it all right. But on the landing, the craft comes down and you hear them saying how low he is, and you see it coming down on the moon, and you even see a bit of dust before he lands. And don't forget, there's a thing going down that hits the surface first, and that cuts the rocket. That's how they make sure the rocket doesn't stay burning. and do untold damage. That puts it off. But the strange thing is the camera goes off at the same time. I can't understand why they were so adamant that once we were on the moon and you're looking down on the moon, why you couldn't leave the camera running, even if the battery ran out. I mean, it was the first film so close to the moon, yet the camera cut out like that. Now, there's a cabin light comes on when you land as well. There's a light comes on inside, and you can hear the astronauts saying that. So I'm just thinking that's very strange. Why they made sure that the camera that was looking out the window on the moon surface went off at the same time as they landed. There's no crater underneath the lunar module that landed. There would be an unbelievable thrust of that. Oh, the rap of that as it would come down, it would blow a big crater underneath, and it didn't. And in the case of the Chinese, I made this point before, in the Chinese lander, the legs go out, they go down like a spider, and then they pull up, and you can see where they disturbed the clay on the moon or the dust. They pushed it out and came back in clear on the Chinese rover, and I believe the Chinese change 4 was genuine. There's no way that was fake. But the Apollo one did nothing. It's just as if it was left down with a crane or some type of a winch. So that's very strange why there was no dust, why the underneath thing, and I'm the first to spot that the pads didn't push it out, and there's no dust in the pads. The pads were sort of upturned like this. None of the dust from the rocket got in there. That is highly, highly suspicious. Now, let's see, can I get the photograph here of this? I might have to pause the camera to get it. Yeah, so this is the famous film. So, yeah, the question is, like, how was this film taken with a camera at about the height, about mid-height on the astronaut? You see that now? It's hard enough to see. You see it there with the light here. See the Earth, which looks very small. See the pointed flag. How come the flag wasn't stretched out? And you see the astronaut. And that photograph looks like a composite where they superimposed one picture on the other. In other words, it's not genuine. How would you take the Earth, the flag, and the astronaut and you'd have to bend down. And there's no viewfinder at all on that camera. Now, there was a letter C on a piece of rock, which they said was a prop. It was just a piece of paper to look like that. Then it disappeared suddenly. And there's the fact that there was little crosses on the camera, and they should always be between the subject. So it should always be here. It can't be here, and yet it was. It was behind, and that proves that they were doctoring the photographs after the event. That wouldn't prove they weren't on the moon, but it proved they did a bit of dickying up after that. Now, the other thing is the moon is not silver, white, and black. The rocks on the moon do shine white. The clay on the shadow is black, but the sandy bits, the dusty bits, are actually a tinge of red. So the Chinese change for whatever you call it proved that. So why was everything the wrong color? Russian astronauts pointed that out too. They said when they must have been up there. I think there was one mission where they did go around it, and they remarked that it wasn't as we see it. It is touch ready brown. Yet the Apollo one had none of that. The other thing then is about the interstellar dust, the solar radiation, the charged particles that exist, electrons and protons and that, and are supposed to be highly dangerous. The Van Allen belt protects us from that. And I made the point, how did they get through the Van Allen belt? They had no way of knowing. And in fact, the Artemis mission is designed to big point is to examine what that type of radiation is. NASA scientists have said it's a big problem. Will they be able to go up there at all? But when I brought up this and a few other people, we know the launch pad for all rockets for space has to be near the equator. Florida, Cape Kennedy, is the southern part of the United States. French Guiana does for Europe, and Azerbaijan for the Russians, all down south. Why? Because the Earth is revolving west to east at at about 22, it goes around once, 22,000 miles every 24 hours, around 900 miles an hour. You and I are now going around at about that, especially if you're on the equator, you're going faster. So you always take off facing east, and that gives you that 22,000 miles an hour kick start extra. You'd never go the other way because you wouldn't get up. You'd want too much power to get up. But what they said in response to our allegation was, what they did is they took off and they went over the North Pole. In other words, if you look at the picture of the Van Allen belt, it kind of gets a bit like this. It's round like this. You'll get it there. Now that is absolute nonsense. They did not. They went over the Sahara Desert. No doubt about that. And the fact that they've come up with that cock and bull story, the only thing is I'm not too sure who came up with it. Now the other thing is moon rock was fake, that Neil Armstrong gave to a museum in Holland. It was faked. It was petrified wood or fossilized wood. You can Google that yourself. So where did the 350 kilos of moon rock go? They said they have it. Well, you think they'd let out the size of a loaf and send it round. I mean, to have equal to two biggish human beings in weight of it, yet nobody ever sees a bit. They never even let out a bit of it. When you think that they'd send it out to the universities or something and have it in something sealed that you could put your finger in and at least feel and say that's the moon. I mean, I'd like to hold a bit of it. No, never, never, never. I think that's highly suspicious. Highly suspicious. The moon rock they have could be taken off the earth somewhere. We don't know. So as I said, one of the things I did not accept is that the flag waved in the wind. Many critics say the American flag on the moon waved in the breeze. I've examined all the footage and I never ever could see any evidence that it did. Don't forget, if you move a flag like that with a stay to keep it out straight, as you move it, it's not going to follow you exactly. I just don't buy that bit. I never could see that. Now, Artemis so takes off tomorrow evening, and with the exception of Apollo, no living thing ever went below LEO, low Earth orbit. No living thing ever went below low Earth orbit. Never went up above the Van Allen belt. What will happen, we don't know. They have all kinds of things on this probe to measure the impact, including things on the impact of women as opposed to men and all of that. So we'll see how that goes. I hope they'll publish it. There is a possibility that it could be found that you can't go into space at all, that there's too much radiation. Now let me just clarify that. Just leave this over here. Let me just clarify that. It's not just the Van Allen belt that's the problem. It's the air. It's the space beyond that. It has interstellar dust. The James Webb telescope has already been hit by a piece of it, and it has all kinds of charged particles, both from the sun and from other more distant objects. And it could be that it's too excessive to let a person ever go there. I hope that's not the case. Because you'd need unbelievable amount of lead shielding and water, and you couldn't get it up there. So that's a big problem. But other than Apollo, nobody has since gone up. Not even a mouse or a rat or anything else, or any species has gone up there, a cat or anything. So now that's still going to be right. Even after the launch tomorrow night, that will still be the case. But at least we'll have put dummies up there, and we should know something. Whether they'll tell us or not, I don't know. It's meant to go around the moon. We'll be keeping a close eye. It's supposed to launch after a few failed starts on Saturday night. That's the 3rd of September. And they say that if you watch out about 10 past 8 here in Ireland, you'll get a glimpse of it in the west. I don't know. I can't tell you that. I thought the Hubble was great. I thought, yeah, they made mistakes with the Hubble, but it was a great thing. I mean, the film it showed of galaxies and all that stuff was unbelievable stuff. And the James Webb telescope, the camera on it was built in Dublin and Waterford. It's an Irish camera by an Irish company. In fact, I know some people who worked on it, have friends who worked on it, and fair play. The James Webb telescope is one of the most exciting things ever to be. And if you go on to NASA site, you'll see the temperatures that exist out there, and that's another point. I wonder what this temperature is in space. Could a spacecraft actually insulate you from the very extremes of highs and lows, and particularly the lows? The James Webb Telescope, in parts of the shade, is nearly zero. So, I mean, you're up on the moon, and that's the case. I just wonder about the temperature thing, and certainly on Mars, it will be extremely cold. But for now, the big question for me is, did they go to the moon? Did any astronaut ever walk on the moon? A lot of people say they didn't. I won't commit to it, but it was some achievement. In 1969, there's more software and computer power in the smartphone that I'm recording this on than was on the Apollo 11 at that time. That is unbelievable stuff, and it all went well and all came safe. Some of them were funny people afterwards. I just don't know, folks. That's it. That up tomorrow anyway. Best of luck to NASA on those projects. I'm fully behind them on that, and I hope that out of it we get something. And the big thing, of course, is whether the radiation and the conditions are harsh or too harsh in the Van Allen belt, and beyond, and right out to the moon. That's what it'll tell us. They'll probably produce photographs of some of the Apollo, but I'd like to see them from some independent source. The Chinese couldn't find the Apollo remains, and Russian astronauts have criticized the destruction of the records. They don't almost say they didn't go, but they say you shouldn't have destroyed those records, and they have a fair point in that. That's enough, folks. Thumbs up to me or thumbs down if you think you have enough of it. We'll see you back for something different in a while. Thank you very much.